Hello, and welcome to this gathering of the Ekklesia. This is meant to be an online community of people from a progressive faith standpoint. So, this is open to people of any kind of faith background, even those who are of a background which lends itself more to doubt or to not believing in the traditional sense of believing, however we might describe that. So whoever, wherever, and whenever you are welcome here. My name is Craig Bartlett. I'm a pastor in Metropolitan Community Churches and in the Progressive Christian Alliance. And I guess you could say this thing is my creation, but I offer it online so that anyone who happens to find it may find a place where they can reflect on life and what really matters for a few moments. So I'm glad you're here, and I hope you'll join with us this evening. This evening we are considering the theme of grieving. I think this is very pertinent given many of the developments that have occurred in the world. As many of you may know, if you've been following the news from Canada, there was a horrific, terrible massacre of people in Nova Scotia in Canada. That has hit me kind of personally because I lived in Nova Scotia for 3 years, and so that was my home, and I spent a lot of time there, and I have many fond memories of the place. So I know many of the neighborhoods and the communities, at least by reputation, if not personally, gone through there and seen those places. So I know what life is like in Nova Scotia, and I know how these places are now being shaken to their very core by these horrific events. On the other hand, I also see the anti-lockdown protests in many places, particularly in the United States. I see indications where people are growing restless, where some parts of Canada and the United States and now New Zealand are preparing to reopen their economies, their communities to some semblance of daily life. Now, we may think some of these plans are being done very carefully, others we may think are being done carelessly. But I think that speaks to something as well, something very real, which we need to consider in our time together this evening. So, as I've done in the past, I invite you to join with me now in a time of centering, a time where we try to enter as fully as possible into the mental space of a spiritual community of faith. So I invite you just to take a neutral spot in front of you, say a neutral spot on the wall, and just take a few moments to breathe in and out. And just to be aware of your breath as it goes in and out. No need to force it or breathe in any particular way. Just be aware of your breath going in and out of you. Don't try to force it. Don't try to heave your shoulders up like you're trying to take some kind of big breath. In fact, try and breathe from your diaphragm. That you feel like you're drawing your breath in from your belly. Try and breathe from the bottom of your torso, not from the top. Be aware of the place that you are in. Are you cross-legged on the floor? Is the place where you're sitting hard or soft? Cool or warm? I hope you're not cold. Are there any sounds that you're aware of around you? Whatever is going on around you, just simply be aware of it. And be in that moment, in that place, wherever you are. Because your moment is part of this moment. The moment that we all share right now. This is the web of life, the life that we all share, the life of the universe, the life which we find in our own individual circumstances. We are aware of it, and let's be grateful that we are part of it. And so let us share this moment, this time together. I don't have any particular music for this evening. Any music that I have to come up with, I have to either look it up, try to find it online, or write it myself, because anything else I need permissions for, and that costs money, or else I get my ass sued off. So hopefully we'll have some more music later on. But for this evening, we have a couple of readings. Of course, being from the Christian tradition, I always include something from the Bible because that is my tradition. That is what I've come to be part of. So today I thought I'd choose something from the Psalms, and I've adapted something from the first 4 verses of Psalm 13. And it is a kind of lament, and it is an expression of grief, and it seemed to me to be appropriate to share that this evening. So an adaptation of Psalm 13, verses 1 to 4. How long will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep the sleep of death. And my enemy will say, I have prevailed. My foes will rejoice because I am shaken. The second reading I like to call a reading of wisdom, and it's taken from an interview done with David Kessler, which was done in the Harvard Business Review. And the name of the article that it comes from in the Harvard Business Review is called "That Discomfort You're Feeling is Grief." David Kessler was someone who worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and he worked with her in the development of the stages of grief. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is well known for her naming of the stages of grief, and so he talks about that, particularly in terms of what we're experiencing now in this time of pandemic and of social distancing and so on. And it seemed to me that his words are worth paying attention to at this time. So, some thoughts on grief in this time from David Kessler. We're feeling a number of different griefs. We feel the world has changed, and it has. We know this is temporary, but it doesn't feel that way, and we realize things will be different. Just as going to the airport is forever different from how it was before 9/11, things will change, and this is the point at which they changed. The loss of normalcy, the fear of economic toll, the loss of connection. This is hitting us, and we're grieving. We're also feeling anticipatory grief. Anticipatory grief is that feeling we get about what the future holds when we're uncertain. Usually it centers on death. We feel it when someone gets a dire diagnosis, or when we have the normal thought that we'll lose a parent someday. Anticipatory grief is also more broadly imagined futures. There's a storm coming. There's something bad out there. With a virus, this kind of grief is so confusing for people. Our primitive mind knows something bad is happening, but you can't see it. This breaks our sense of safety. We're feeling that loss of safety. I don't think we've collectively lost our sense of general safety like this. Individually, or as smaller groups, people have felt this. But altogether, this is new. We are grieving on a micro and a macro level. Whenever I talk about the stages of grief, I may have to remind people that the stages aren't linear and may not happen in this order. It's not a map, but it provides some scaffolding for this unknown world. There's denial, which we see a lot of early on. That should be see a lot of. This virus won't affect us. There's anger. You're making me stay home and taking away my activities. There's bargaining. Okay, if I social distance for 2 weeks, everything will be better, right? There's sadness. I don't know when this will end. And finally, there's acceptance. This is happening. I have to figure out how to proceed. So the questions come. For some of us, it might be, when will I work again? For others, it's when will it be safe to be friends? When will it be safe to go out for dinner? Or coffee? Or to a movie? Or to throw a party? For some of us, it's when will it be safe to attend church or temple? When will it be safe to travel, to go for a picnic in the park? Or when will it be okay to go outside without a mask on, fogging up my glasses? Has it ever occurred to you that these questions that you ask And this is the discomfort, the dis-ease that accompanies these questions is grief. That's what David Kessler has been suggesting, and that's what I'd like to suggest today, because what he has said, the points that he makes in that interview, make a lot of sense to me. We must be honest with ourselves and with our world and with others and say, we have lost many aspects of our daily lives. And we're unsure as to when they will return. Those of us who simply have the pressures of daily life to contend with, for us it's bad enough, but this grief is compounded when you have other griefs piled on top of that. During this time, any family which loses a loved one, COVID-19 related or not, you know that there are certain wants, there are certain needs that they have. They want to be surrounded by family and friends and well-wishers, to be supported and to find strength. At times of significant community trauma like Nova Scotia is going through right now, the first impulse is for us to gather together in large numbers and give expression to the sadness and the hurt and the anger that everyone is experiencing in that situation. And in all of those cases, the simple fact is we can't do that, at least not to the degree that we are accustomed to doing. We have to do these things online or in very small groups. And as wonderful as all of these expressions of sympathy are, and they are wonderful, I watched the Nova Scotia Together vigil, as many people did in Canada and around the world, and we saw the moving tributes from politicians, from faith leaders, from community leaders, from prominent Nova Scotians, both living there and living abroad. We saw tributes of music. Perhaps the most touching one is where the fiddler Natalie McMaster played a duet with one of the people who ended up being a victim in that massacre when she was playing a fiddle tune herself to share as part of the COVID-19 kitchen party. I mean, all expressions of sympathy and of solidarity like that are good and they are wonderful. But we also have to admit that they're not the same. They are not the same as what we would usually do. We would usually gather together physically in great numbers to think, to meditate, to pray if that's our tradition, to remember, to cry, to hold each other, to speak face to face, and often to share food and drink together. Right now, we don't have those things. We don't have access to those things, those rituals, those shared times, those shared experiences. And our lives are not as complete as they used to be. It's okay to name that. We need to name that. And we need to acknowledge the loss that comes with that. On the other hand, we have a situation where that reality becomes too much for us, and we can't take it anymore. And so we have the demands to open up again because we're strong and we're invulnerable. We're part of the land of the free and the home of the brave. I think that seems to be what's behind all of those anti-lockdown protests. We can decry how ill-informed all of these protests are, but behind all the bravado that seems to be on display there, if you scratch the surface a little bit, I believe we'll find that good old mix of anger, denial, bargaining, and sadness. The classic stages of grief. And funnily enough, I also see this in some online gatherings that I've been a part of. And in these gatherings, there is the tendency to accentuate the positive and only accentuate the positive. To speak only of tell us something which gives meaning to your life. Tell us how you're experiencing joy these days. Tell us how life is good. Tell us how life is great. And many of these situations are in places where I am with other ministers, other clergy. And yes, it's important for us to talk about what we do to try and ensure that life goes on, and for those of us who are in the helping professions, how helping goes on. For those of us who are in the religious life, how ministry goes on. Yes, I understand that. But we also need to make room for what we miss. I don't remember hearing questions about what do you miss? Whom do you miss? What emptiness do you experience from time to time? And I would dare to say, if we wish to accentuate the positive only, that too is a form of denial. And both the things I've talked about here seem to me to be situations where there is an unwillingness to name that which we miss. And that is an important process. That's an important part of stepping towards acceptance. We can't do the things that we're used to doing, and we miss those things. We don't know what the future holds, and that causes fear. It makes us afraid. But it seems to me that only after we lament the things that we have lost, only after that we can accept the things that we can do. It's only after we talk about what we miss that I would say things as simple as washing your hands and maintaining appropriate social distancing and masking yourself when you go out. It's at that point that those things will make sense. It's at that point we can share our moments of joy and of victory. Realizing that we accept the loss of not being able to meet together in person. It seems to me only after we do that we can gain value from meeting online. That we know that we can't do the things that we're used to doing, but we can do this. So, my hope today is that we will be able to accept the things that we have lost, the things that we don't have access to right now, and to accept the fact that things will not be just as they have always been when we start getting back to some sense of normalcy. But that there are things which we can access now. That there are things that we can do now. And that there are aspects of life which we can enjoy now. So may it be. And so at this time, a time which you might call meditation or prayer for others, I invite you to think about and to name either quietly or out loud the things you miss in this time. I invite you to think about the people you miss, whom you can't be in contact with physically at this time. I also invite you to think about those places, in particular, those places and those people who may be near and dear to you, which are in need of help, of support, and of comfort at this time. Of course, we can remember the people of Nova Scotia as they go through the trauma of the aftermath of the massacre which occurred in Portapique, in Wentworth, throughout Colchester County, and into Enfield. We remember those who have lost family members, friends, work colleagues. We remember those who have been first responders, who were first responders in that crisis. And those who seek either professionally or just personally to be a source of support to those who are grieving at this time. And so in this time, we do not blithely pray that God will simply wave a magic wand and change things. But we pray that our prayers will somehow change us so that we may be empowered to change things. And to that, may everyone say, Amen. So, thanks for being part of this time today. In future times, I'm going to be carrying on with these aspects of grief, and so I want to move on to in future times together. I want to move on to the aspects of acceptance, and also to a sixth stage of grief, which has been added to the stages of grief. And this is the stage of finding meaning. And I think that will be an important part of the stages of grief as well. So in times ahead, I'll be thinking about acceptance and meaning. And so I'll be talking about them. They'll form themes for the days ahead and for our future meetings. And so I hope that you will be available to be part of those times. So until then, be safe, practice good hygiene, practice appropriate distancing wherever you are. Please care for others in appropriate ways, and always be prepared to love and serve. Blessings to you all, and I certainly hope that we get a chance to see you again soon.